started. Hello everybody, welcome to today's IEP Live Learn Lunch. Really excited today to be joined by Steve Morris and Sean Dukes from Learning Curve Group, who are going to be talking to us about climate change and environmental awareness. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Sean and Steve. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name's Steve Morris. I'm the Commercial Director at Learning Curve. Very quickly, we deliver a whole range of different courses, and this is a section of one of the courses that we actually deliver, courses that sort of impact about 100,000 learners each year. So hopefully you'll find this interesting. It's an incredibly topical area to be discussing. Literally, Sean is one of Sean will introduce himself, but he's one of our expert tutors on this topic. So I'm here a bit more for window dressing. Sean is the expert, to be quite honest with you. So I'll pass over to you, Sean, and I'll upload the screen.
Excellent, thanks, Steve. Good afternoon, everyone. As Steve's alluded to there, this is a very wide and varied topic with climate change. You get some good engagement from people. You'll gain a lot of knowledge and to further enhance any experiences that you may have previously had. Steve's in the process now just putting it together, so it's going to come up. It would be helpful to everyone if you have a pen and paper to hand where you may want to take some notes, some questions that you may have for a little bit later, and we might even surprise you at the end with a little quiz. It's not like being at school, so just a little bit of a quiz to see if you've absorbed and feel engaged about what we've been talking about and what we're trying to achieve. This is a topic that I am a tutor with, and I do enjoy and I do have a passion about, and I hope you people feel the same. And Steve will go into a lot more at the end and tell you a lot about Learning Curve and the course and the way forwards. So I'll make a start. So the question is, everybody asks, what is the environment? It's quite simple. It's everything that surrounds us, that supports us, what the planet is made up of. It's the land, it's the air, the water, the plants, people, and property. So it's the flora and fauna. Everything around us is the environment. And when we start to go in and dig a little bit deeper, and I'll touch on one of the topics that we will touch on slightly, deforestation. I'm sure at times you'll have heard about the rainforests and the depletion of the rainforests and the global impact that it does have on the environment through the loss of oxygen and the carbon consumption and so on. So next slide, please, Steve. So what are the key challenges facing the environment? I'll just drop that down. I can't see everybody. That's it. Excellent. So the key challenge facing the environment, we've got a few topic headers there. Obviously, waste production. This is a massive one. And as we look, the average person produces about 4.3 pounds of waste per day, which is a massive amount. But the United States alone account for 220 million tonnes per year. And obviously much of this waste ends up in landfills, which generate enormous amounts of methane. Now, other areas of methane that we get, if anybody can think of, anybody got any thoughts on big producers of methane? Excellent, Cheryl. Yep, that's an excellent answer. It is the cows, it's the cattle. They produce a vast amount of methane. So well done on that. The other areas we're looking at is water pollution. Fresh water is crucial to life on Earth. We don't have water, we don't grow crops, we don't drink, we don't hydrate. So more sources are being polluted through human activities. And there's companies I've worked for in the past and I've been made aware of where they've been fined by environmental agencies and so on, where they've polluted the water streams, the sewers, etc., with illegal products being poured down them, which is a massive impact. Deforestation. is something that I touched on a little bit earlier. So the demands of the increase in population and the more trees that's been lost, and it's estimated that we're losing over 80,000 acres of tropical forests a day. That is absolutely enormous. We'll talk about rising sea levels. This comes in with the polar ice caps, and when you look across Antarctica, you'll see the decreasing ice caps, or the glaciers starting to melt. But that's also having another impact, if people are aware, on the polar bears. So it's a knock-on effect again. So we're losing polar bears, we're getting rising sea levels. So when we look at places, and I can choose one for example, if people are aware, in York is built on a floodplain, and it was only in the last couple of weeks they had a massive floods again, where it was houses, businesses that were impacted, and this is all to do with the rise in sea levels. Next slide, please, Steve. A big one is transportation. And this one can be twofold for you as an individual and the environment. So with the ever-growing population, we have a lot of transport, obviously fueled by the natural resources and the greenhouse gases, such as the petroleum. And it's telling us here, in 2014, transportation accounted for 26% of all greenhouse gas emissions. And it also contributes to a range of environmental issues, such as destruction of natural habitats and increase in air pollution. If you as an individual start to look on an area that we'll cover a little bit later, when we talk about your carbon footprint, we can all make a great effort, and we could be looking to help in reducing our footprint. And it would also help us in a second area where, if we stop using our cars every day, car sharing, I know now COVID is still here, but with measures in place, you can go car sharing. We're going to reduce these emissions levels, and also it could actually give you a little bit more exercise if you decided to walk or cycle to work, if possible. So it can be a twofold thing. Air pollution has become an increasingly dangerous problem, particularly in heavily populated cities. When we look at London, you look at China, and you see people in China, for example, way before COVID, were all wearing masks, and that's due to the high pollution levels. And the World Health Organization has found that 80% of people living in urban areas are exposed to air quality levels deemed unfit by the organization. Next slide, please, Steve. So climate change. The word climate means a long-term weather pattern for a particular area. And I know Helen started off at the beginning asking the question, what was it like in your area? We've got a lot of people saying it's lovely and sunny. Some people, the person in Dartford there, apologies for forgetting the name, sun trying to break through. Well, up here in the northeast at this moment in time, we've got sun in Teesside, but 12, 14 miles up the road to East Durham, where I am, I've got strong winds. It's overcast. So in different areas, we've got such a shift in change throughout the country. So the equator is an imaginary line around the middle of the Earth, a bit like a belt. The areas closest to the belt have the hot climates. You jumped on one there, Steve?
Yeah, I think it automatically went rather than me doing it.
There we are, we're back. So climate change, it's sometimes called global warming. This is the process of our planet heating up. Our planet has warmed by an average of 1 degree in the last 100 years. And if things don't change, it could increase a lot more. So 1% may sound a very, very small figure, but it's already having a big impact on weather around the world. And I think we can say that ourselves with some of the weather conditions we are suffering recently. But they're becoming unpredictable, and it's causing, again, the sea level to rise. And as I touched on earlier, causing the ice to melt. Next slide, please, Steve. So why is it happening? Does anybody have any ideas why? What's causing this to happen? Does anybody have any thoughts? The greenhouse effect. Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, so the greenhouse effect is causing that. So what we're going to do now, increasing travel, cars, planes. That's a very, very good one, that, Cheryl. If you remember when we first went into lockdown, did everybody notice that you could hear the birds singing again, the sky was blue, the noise pollution levels was down, and it was something that was fantastic. And now we're back to where we started. Next slides, please, Steve. So, in a nutshell, the Earth's climate is getting warmer because of human activity. We burn fossil fuels such as coal, oil, natural gas for energy. We're looking to generate electricity to power our cars and for heating and cooking. We also cut down trees across the planet to make space for farming and expandable cities. And I'm sure people will see around their local areas. You might not drive somewhere for a couple of months and suddenly, oh dear, there's a housing estate suddenly popping up. And you remember that used to be fields. I used to walk there when I was younger. So it's changing dramatically every day. All this extra greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, it's warming up the planet very, very quickly. And it's changing the Earth's climate, and it's affecting every part of our world. Next slide, please, Steve. So just a little bit more on the greenhouse gases, and you can see just by the images there how much pollution has been put out into the atmosphere. Next slide, please, Steve. So we burn fossil fuels, release greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, like as Cheryl alluded to earlier, and the greenhouse gases are keeping our planet warm. By releasing more and more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, we're causing our planet to warm up very, very quickly. Next slide, please, Steve. So what are the world's countries doing about the climate change? So what we're going to go and look at on the next slide in a second, it's going to talk about what are the UK doing, what are Sweden doing, what are Denmark doing, China and the US. And it's very, very interesting when you actually look what other countries are doing. Next slide, please, Steve. So in December 2015, 196 countries signed up to the Paris Agreement. This is the most important pact for international cooperation on tackling climate change, and countries are taking steps to deliver on it. The UK, Norway, France, and New Zealand are some of the countries that have legally committed to the zero emissions by 2015. Big challenge for them, and some are going the right way, some, as you will see in a moment, not as much. Next slide, please, Steve. So the steps that they're making, the first one is fantastic. Sweden, with relatively low carbon emissions and a highly efficient recycling system. In fact, Sweden is so good at recycling, it has to import garbage from other countries to keep the recycling plants opening. And that is a phenomenal achievement in itself. Malta, a small little country when it comes to resources. It's a tough, tiny little island in the Mediterranean, but this also makes Malta all the more susceptible to the rising tides of global warming. So while until recently the country has relied on imported oil for its energy, now having a shift towards solar power and gas-fired plants sees a little 120-mile square yards, as 120-mile island among one of the leaders in the fight against climate change, which is outstanding. Next slide, please, Steve. Next slide, please, Steve. There we are. The UK total output has gone down by around 45% since 1990, which again is a fantastic achievement. The UK is the first country in the world to create a legally binding national commitment to cut greenhouse gas emissions. This was a Climate Change Act of 2008, which pledges to cut our emissions as a country by 80% by 2050. And on the current progress rates, we are actually heading towards that really, really well. So what we have now is Australia. So if any Australian friends are online, we do apologise. As I say, Australia is one of the biggest sources of fossil fuels. It also is a country highly vulnerable to impacts of climate change. And the emissions of greenhouse gases from Australian exports are responsible for 3.6% of global emissions. And the projections published at the end of 2019 suggest that Australian emissions will only be around 16%. So I'm just reading a message there coming in. It says there's an expert.
Don't worry, Sean. I'm just popping some comments in and
oh, right. Sorry, I thought somebody asked a question.
In for the end. Yeah, don't worry.
Yeah, that's right. Thought somebody popped me a question. So 16% lower in 2005 than in 2030. Next slide, please, Steve. So Denmark, this is a fantastic achievement. It's a city where the total number of bikes outnumber the total number of cars. And it's been hailed Europe's green capital. So the capital aims to be the first neutral city by 2025. And by the end of 2019, all buses will be electric, which they are still heading to fully achieve that. And Copenhagen has also started an initiative to plant 100,000 new trees by the end of 2025. So again, it's actually replacing what's being lost. So just below there, we've got China. China, very, very big production. And it's the home to the world's worst air pollution. It was something I mentioned a little bit earlier about people wearing masks even way before COVID. And obviously China's making an effort to reduce its carbon dioxide emissions by 60 to 65% by 2030. And in 2014, China claimed its spot on the world's #1 investor in renewable energy by spending $83.3 billion on mainly hydroelectric, wind and solar power. And it aims to spend a further $360 billion on renewable energy by 2020. So China heading that way. They are doing outstanding work on that. So that's really, really good. Next slide, please, Steve. So now we're looking at ourselves as individuals. So this can be within your home, it could be in your office space, could be in a factory or a shop or an office, somewhere where you work. If you can think about little ways now, how could you help the environment? What little things can you do? Remember the old adage, every little helps. So what can we do? Does anybody have any thoughts what we could possibly do?
Oh, spoilt it there, Sean, sorry.
You jumped in, didn't you? Mm-hmm. That's a great one there, car sharing. That's excellent, yeah. That's really, really good. Anybody else got any thoughts, ideas on what we can do? Turn the heating down? Yep, that's another one. Do we always need it so high? You know, I just think we've become too soft and too comfortable. Yeah, it's another good answer. Do the next slide, Steve, please. Yeah, not charge devices, wasting electricity if we don't need it. Recycling, excellent. So all these answers that I've got up on the screen, it's what you're actually giving me now. So reduce the amount of electricity and heat that you use at work and at home. Try to walk or cycle instead of driving. So again, reduce the carbon footprint, but it's twofold where we're getting that exercise as well, releasing serotonin to make us feel better. Buy energy saving devices, AAA rated. As somebody's also mentioned, we can recycle packaging. When we go back to the transportation, and we're actually looking in at the environment, shopping locally, where we're going to be reducing. It's going to be environment friendly. It's going to help your local community to prosper by shopping locally. So you're supporting your local businesses. Install LED bulbs at home. You know, it's vast the amount of things we can do. You know, when we're printing, you know, can we print double-sided? Do we need to print? You know, do we need lights on all the time? Can we have motion sensors fitted so we're saving energy? There is hundreds upon hundreds of thoughts, collecting rainwater for your gardens, you know, so many different ideas. Next slide, please, Steve. So we've talked through a whistle, well, wind stop tour of the environment and climate change. And what I've got now, I've got a little few questions for everyone. So if you want to take a look at these questions, I'll read through the questions and I'll give you a minute or two to just to pull your answers together. So next slide, Steve. Excellent, thank you. So what is the term used to describe the way in which we can measure the effect, the amount of carbon we use and it has on the environment? So you look at it there, it's a two-word answer. It's what we impact, what we can cause and what we can reduce. So question 2, in which European city did the 196 nations agree on a landmark global plan to curb climate change in December 2015? And I'm not going to give anybody any clues that the Eiffel Tower's there. Question 3, name 3 types of renewable energy. And if you think about Malta, what they've currently been doing, looking at what China are trying to do, and that will actually give you a good guide to where we're looking at the answer. And the final question I've got here is, which of these countries has the highest per capita CO2 emissions? Is it the USA, India, the United Kingdom, or China?
So we've had one very quick person has managed to finish. All 2 now, it's flying up now. The rest, like me, are trying to think of those 3 types of renewable energy and then how to type them in. So we will just leave that open for another few seconds to give everyone the opportunity of doing this. So do love a poll.
Yeah,
So Cheryl, you should be able to answer on your screen. And if you are using a device, it may be that you need to scroll across, because Cheryl's asked how we answer. If you can't do it, Cheryl, because you're using a device and it's not letting you, just pop them into the chat. That's absolutely fine. Sometimes tablets can make it a bit trickier to get involved in the polls. Okay, so we'll give it a few more seconds. And then we will share those results, and I think Sean's going to take us through those answers. Okay,
yes,
so we've got just another, oh, we've had someone who's skipped one, that's fine as well. And I can see that Cheryl's popped those into chat. So don't worry if you haven't filled them in, because it was just for fun. So I'm going to end that poll and we can share the results. As Sean takes us through, I think on the next slide, we've got those answers, haven't we?
we have.
Yeah.
Next slide, please, Steve.
Just having to come out of the quiz because it's sorry, out of the poll. Oh no, it's not letting me click on at the moment.
That's okay, Steve. That's not a problem.
Right.
There it is. It is. You're fine, Steve. It's moving on. Just do another. There you go.
Yeah. There we go. So the first answer pops up, and to what we talked about, what can we try to reduce at home and at work? It's our carbon footprint. So a big clap if you've got that one right.
I think everybody did. Well done.
Excellent. Question 2. I didn't give you any clues with Paris on this one. With the Eiffel Tower. So how do we do with that one, Helen?
Sorry. Oh, yes, yes, people got it. Yep. Sorry, you put me on the spot then. I was busy reading Cheryl's chat answers. You caught me out being distracted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just reading her answers. So yes, and Cheryl and the others got that too. And actually, I did pop a comment in chat that it might be a good place for us to say this, because am I right in thinking that the Paris Agreement was the agreement that Trump, as soon as he got into power in the US, withdrew them from?
Yes.
And my question was, and I've not followed it since, has the Biden administration re-entered the Paris Agreement?
They're still not fully there yet, and you might be pinching me answer to question 4.
Sorry. Okay.
And we'll cover that one, go back to 2 in a second. Name 3 types of renewable energy. We've got the wind power, the hydroelectrical, we've got tidal, waves, the ground source heat pump and geothermal energy are all types of renewable energy. And how do we do that one?
Good. Yeah, we got lots of different answers. I think Cheryl may have seen your slides because she got the first 3. The only thing she didn't do was in the right order. Almost, she flipped them. Well done, Cheryl. But yes, yeah, some good examples there. I actually live near a wind farm, so I spend quite a lot of time when I'm thinking, looking at the wind turbines, and they're very beautiful to watch. Well, and they're a good indication of how much to wrap up before you leave the house in the winter as well. So they serve a double purpose.
Yeah, well, I live on the northeast coast, so we do have all the turbines out at sea as well. So it has changed the landscape and obviously the coastal area quite a bit. But they are serving a good purpose. And the final question. So which of these countries has the highest CO2 emissions? And
now, lots of people here, Sean, thought China.
Yes, yeah, I saw some come in with China on. But when you mentioned about the Trump and the Biden, ex-president and president, they actually pulled out because if you can think back to one of the first slides I put up about the biggest polluters, the 220 billion tons of waste was the USA. And when we further went through the slides, we talked about China being the most proactive in what they're actually doing of the bigger producers in the world of products. So China.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think everybody automatically thinks China, don't they? I have family that live in America though, and one of the things that I find amazing when I go there, and if there's any Bill Bryson fans, there's some of his books that you read, his travel books talk about this, and it's amazing. In America, nobody walks anywhere, and it's really difficult to walk, even if you're just going from one shop within a sort of shopping area to the next shop. Often you have to get in your car and drive to get there because there's no sort of walkways to get you from one place to another. So it's sort of by design a little bit as well.
It is, and when you look at the vehicles, for instance, in America, I think there's a good point coming in from Alison. Like, unlike Copenhagen, where everybody cycles, yeah, it's fantastic. You know, you drive around Oxford, Cambridge type of areas. For those people who live there may tell me rightly or wrongly, lots and lots of cycling, you know, Amsterdam, lots of cyclists, you know, which is brilliant. So again, it's helping you release that serotonin, getting the exercise, getting you fit, helping the planet. So it's a twofold thing.
Sean, I've probably got a quick question for you. Is there one thing that we could all do that would make the biggest amount of difference, right? I mean, I know you listed a number of things there of, you know, walk, don't drive, and LED light bulbs and stuff. Is there recognized within the sort of the sector almost one thing that would make the biggest difference at all? Because I think for a lot of individuals, they sat there and they think, you know, and we religiously do our recycling and all of that at the moment, and you do wonder whether am I making the slightest bit of difference, full stop. And then I go on a plane and fly to Spain or whatever there. So
yeah, it depends on the type. I'll look at firstly in a business perspective. from the business side of things, it depends on the fields that you work in. Let's say take a factory that produces a lot of metal waste. Now, we're going through the production, we're trying in businesses to reduce the carbon footprint, but obviously you've got 24/7 working, 7 days a week. So it's the production cost, the electric use, it's the byproducts. Now, all these byproducts, we've still then got to get rid of them, and they've got to go through different processes. So some can go direct to landfill, some can go to specialized landfill once it's been treated. It may have to go through a 3-stage process. So all the time, we're actually increasing our carbon footprint. So sometimes there's things we have to look, adapt and change. And the business that I've been involved with for a number of years, they're actually trying to come away from oil-based products and trying to go more water-based with other soluble solvents in there to give a cut and compound. So the business is trying massively to reduce. Us as individuals, I think we use too much electricity. And I'm sure people on here, because I remember my mum saying it to me, you know, we're not an airport, we're not expecting aeroplanes to land, turn that light off, you know, shut that door, keep the heat in. There's little small things that we can all do. And somebody, I don't know, it was Cheryl earlier, mentioned about your phone goes down a little bit, we stick it on charge straight away, you know, rather than letting it run down the battery. Then when at the end of the day, plug your phone in, charge it up, put things on timers. You know, people go out and leave the lights on, energy saving appliances. These are a number of things, but for me the biggest one is personally probably the electrical use that we do have, the electrical waste. When there's nobody in a room, turn it off. Do we need the heat on in that room? You know, if it's not used, turn it off.
Yeah.
You know, so you're saving yourself money and protecting the environment.
Makes sense. Do we want to open it up to any questions? If people have got any further questions.
A good one just come in there, Steve, right, from David Bester.
Yeah.
David's come in with a great one, and this is a fantastic one if you're a vegan, because it adds weight to the case of vegetarians and so on. Eating less meat is a massive one, and that's purely around the methane, because what was mentioned earlier. So if we do eat less meat, we'll have obviously less usage of the cattle for meat and so on. So it will reduce the methane levels.
Okay. Any others that we want to pick up?
Okay, so let me just have a look back. Let me see. So, right, here's one for you then, Sean. As an expert on climate change, what do you think the UK's strategy on energy should be moving forward?
I think where the UK government's going now and clearly focusing on, and something I alluded to earlier, wherein you've got the top of Scotland, we've got different weather climates and different conditions throughout the UK. If I go down, for instance, I leave the northeast and travel to London. Time I get to London, I've got to take my coat off because you can feel the difference in temperature when you're getting down into London. So it does rise temperature across the UK. So the government strategy now, they are looking very, very much into wind power, using our natural resources that is there for us. So I think that is the way forwards the government's looking.
Right, excellent, thank you. So we've had a comment from Elizabeth around eating less meat, saying, oh, your B12 drops, so you will need to take supplements. I'm not sure, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I've been vegetarian, I'm not vegan, I've been vegetarian for, oh, I'm giving my age away here now. for no, nearly 30 years. Then I was obviously extremely young when I became vegetarian. And although I do, I'm very careful with my diet, make sure I get a variety. I've never had a problem with B12 being low, and I've had blood tests over the years. But I think you're right, Elizabeth, you do need to, whenever you do a diet that excludes anything, you do need to get advice and make sure that you are getting all the nutrients that you need in order to do it. So I think it's always really important. We see lots of stuff, don't we, about going meat free, but you do need to make sure that you're getting the nutrition you need. So a balanced diet is really important, and GPs can help with that. But it is interesting. Any other questions at the moment for Sean? I'm just giving people time to type things in if they want to, or alternatively, if you don't like typing and you would like to ask Sean a question, you can raise your hand using the facility, and I could unmute you if anyone would like to ask a question. While we're waiting for that, I did mention while we were preparing for the session to Sean and Steve that when I was talking to my daughter, my 8-year-old daughter, and her friend yesterday, and I told them we were having a session around climate change and environmental awareness, and they asked me, or they made me promise I would mention some things that they think is really important when it comes to protecting the environment and being more aware. And one of the things was and I thought this was very sweet, Amelia said that we shouldn't tread on weeds because the plants are really important. So just because they're weeds, we shouldn't step on them. We should try and take care of the plants around us. So that's from an eco warrior up in Edinburgh for us to think about. My daughter said, my daughter Zara, her tip was to try and use less plastic. And that's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because that one's really been picked up on ever since the David Attenborough show. There's been a real drive towards it. You just don't see plastic straws and the things that you used to see anymore when you're out and about.
Sean, I've got a quickie for you in terms of obviously we had the pandemic and people weren't traveling, and you made a comment there just about we're sort of back to where we were. Did the pandemic almost have any effect, right? I mean, has it effectively slowed down the inevitable of global warming, or because it almost feels like we'll struggle to ever get back to anything resembling like the pandemic, where nobody traveled and whatever else. So almost if the pandemic didn't make that much of a difference, will sort of everything else make a difference? Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. It was an observation that I've made. I was stood in the garden, and I live where I live. As I say, I've got a dean at the side of me, so I can hear the birds singing, etc. But it seemed to be so much more peaceful. You couldn't hear any traffic at all. You looked up to the sky, and the sky was blue. There was no smoke trails. The whole area just seemed to be uplifted, and it was it seemed very calming. And I think a lot of it as well why I was like this, because there's a lot of businesses had staff where possible working from home, and factories in themselves, because it's an industrious area around East Durham, and we had less production taking place at the time as well. So I think all that impacted on the environment, and I think at that time it has had a massive impact on global warming, because we were producing less carbon, didn't have the vehicles on the road, we had people out walking dogs who probably hadn't walked for a long time together. You saw families and couples out, and it was really nice, you know. And I would like to see more and more of that, and we can make that change, and we can make that difference. Yeah.
Do you think the inevitability is that for our kids and our kids' kids or whatever that we obviously just seem to have had an unusual phenomenon with like 3 storms in very quick succession as we worked our way through the alphabet of storm names and stuff? It seemed to be one after the other after the other. Is that fairly much a natural consequence of where we are at the moment? Will we see more of that if these things keep happening, if global warming keeps happening?
Most definitely. I think we're on to Gladys. I think that was our last storm, because it was back to back. Now, when we look at people not coming on board, fully committed to it, and the biggest polluters, as Helen mentioned about driving from one shop to another, when in the US, when you look at things like this, in the US, drive big, huge gas guzzling vehicles. It's very cheap over there to buy the fuel, I still believe. Unlike it is at the moment here, it's gone up dramatically. So hopefully it does put a few people off the roads, because I keep saying every little helps.
Yeah.
But I do think we will start to see more and more storms and floods across the low-lying areas throughout the UK.
Brilliant. Listen, thank you for that. And I think as far as we're concerned, look, we'd just like to thank everybody for listening to the session today. If people are actually interested, they're one of the things that Sean actually does do, he's an expert tutor within one of our courses that we deliver, which is, this is not meant to be a sales pitch, so I apologise if it comes across that way, but we do a level 2 course in understanding climate change and environmental awareness. So it is actually a qualification that people can get accredited in. And Sean is one of the tutors that delivers that training. So if it is a topic that people want to know more about and find out more about, there is more that you can actually do. And it feels like it's one of those topics that if you're not doing it for you, you almost need to be looking at it for your kids or your grandkids or whatever, because quite frankly, it feels like they're going to be the ones that feel the bigger impact of all of this than we do. So listen, on behalf of everybody at the IEP, I'd certainly like to thank Sean for his time in terms of putting these slides together, and obviously his delivery and his knowledge and whatever, and sharing that with us. It's a topic that's not going to go away. I think it's fairly obvious in that. And thank you, Helen, for your time in terms of organising this for us today. We really appreciate the opportunity, and thanks to everybody for listening.
Thanks, Steve.
All right.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Steve. I really do appreciate that. And everyone's saying, a few people, Alison, Elizabeth, and more who have scrolled past, I can't say, are saying thank you for an interesting session. And it really is. And I think it is, as you said, it's very important. It's important for our children and for ourselves as well. And as I say, it was great, to see the children being so interested when I was chatting to them yesterday. And actually they're very much, well, why don't we just stop doing the things that are damaging the environment? So it's key that we as adults start to think that way, don't we? So thank you very much. And if anybody does want to get hold of the details on how you can do that level 2 course, please do get in touch with me at the IEP, and I'll happily put you on to Sean and Steve to help you do that. I always finish by saying, as well as saying thank you to the people. So Lucy's just said that. So Lucy, I will get in touch with you after the session and share information on how you can get in touch with Steve. You're very welcome. We do have more sessions coming up. As you know, LiveLearnLunch is something that we do every week, but actually we've got something a little different next week as well. We have 2 webinars. We have our LiveLearnLunch at 12 o'clock on Wednesdays we normally do, where we'll be joined by the Good Employability Company, who will be looking at what are we here for, why bother, choices, opportunity, employment and welfare, ethics and consequences. So it's going to be a really interesting session. And for those of you who have been to any of the Good Employability sessions before, you will know David always makes us think about the things that we make assumptions about sometimes. So that's a great one to come along for. Please do enroll for that. The details are on our Learning Network e-bulletin. But we also have a LiveLearnLunch taking place on Tuesday the 15th of March, and now this is actually going to take place in the morning. It's going to be at 9:30 a.m. and it's actually the launch of our new employability course, Coaching for Employability. We're super excited that we are being joined by Bounce Australia, who are rolling out this program with the IEP. So please, if you can, enroll, register and come along and find out about this new specific or specialised training programme for coaching specifically. I've said that too many times. For employability. I think I need my lunch. I think my sugar levels have dropped. So thank you very much for your time today. As ever, it's a real pleasure to see you all. Thank you so much, Steve and Sean, for today's session. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. I can see that Sean has popped in there some details for those of you who would like to find out more details. So I will leave the session open so you've got time to click on that. But I look forward to seeing you all on a future session. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Helen.
Thank you.
Okay, so brilliant. I'll leave that open for a second for anyone clicking on the link.